If you are Igbo, listen carefully.
The British saw the Igbo as rebellious. Even Nigeria today, they see the Igbo as rebellious. Are the Igbo people rebellious?
No, they are not rebellious. They ask questions. And they like to get reasonable answers. Except maybe in the army.
If you care about the future of the Igbo people, subscribe now.
No one should carry out an order that is not lawful.
No one should carry out an order that is not lawful.
No one should carry out an order that is not lawful. So that's when the Igbo man gets trapped into things like that. So that brings this wrong impression about the attitude of Igbo man. Because he wants answers, he asks questions. And of course, questions also are not very welcome. People don't like questions. Because if you begin to explain, people begin to think that it erodes their authority. But that is the inherent thing in the Igbo mind. First of all, he will ask you questions, and you expect those questions to be, the answers to be credible, to be something he can grapple with. If it is not, it becomes difficult for the Igbo man to follow you. So if you say you're rebellious in that position, you're the one that is wrong.
Okay, so but why is the Igbo man like that?
Because I think by our nature, we try to define good and bad. Okay, let me go down to the basic and let you know. The Igbo man is the only person, and I want to say that with all sense of responsibility, and in Nigeria, only person who can give evidence against his own brother on something that he knows. For example, if his brother encroaches on your land, his uterine brother, if you bring him to a tribunal, he will say, yes, this is our boundary. I've told my brother many times to get off here, that this doesn't belong to us, but he won't listen to me. That's the Igbo man for you. Yeah, that's the Igbo man for you.
How did we become that way?
Well, yes, the Igbo man believes in what they call retributive justice. Let me put it in that way, talking about that. The Igbo man believes in retributive justice, that what you sow, you reap. So the Igbo man likes to be on the side where, let it not be his foible that ruined him. So that brings up another issue to him, which other people also misinterpret. So that's the answer.
Okay. There are some people that say that the foundation of Igbo society is based on natural law. Is that correct?
Yeah, very correct. I agree with that completely. Natural law. Because the Igbos too, one of the many things that stand them out and which has made the Igbo stand out is that the Igbos are very observant. And I'm saying this in simple terms. The Igbos are very observant people. And it is the observance of their ancestors that taught them all they know, even before interacting with other civilizations. And that helped them to adapt. And when you're observant in that way, you begin to get closer to nature. And you begin to understand how and when things happen. And you begin to rearrange your life around all that. So the end point is that you become a man who believes that this is the sequence of things, and if you want to get the best of it, this is how to behave, or this is how not to behave, because they go together. So that may be the reason for that.
You've heard that because the Igbos always ask questions and demand credible answers, they have been misunderstood as rebellious and confrontational to authority. Now, stick with us as we explore the deeper philosophy behind Igbo justice and how the principle of what you sow is what you reap has shaped the thought pattern of Igbo society.
Moving forward, the British brought the law on us with force of arm. How did Igbo society approach the matter of organizing itself and making sure that people understood certain regulations, laws of society without waving the stick on them, without gun, without anything?
We know that the Igbo society basically is an egalitarian society in the sense that everybody gets up in the morning trying to better himself. Of course, the Igbos had kings, which started from 900 AD with the Ezen, and that diffused amongst the Igbo. So if you look at the Igbo territory, as it were, which was quite large, taking all the Igbo-speaking areas, including all the 5 Igbo-speaking states, choosing the Igbo-speaking communities in the Delta, in the Rivers area. So there was a hegemony that reached them and brought order into their lives about what to do and what not to do. And then there were taboos which they obeyed. And the point is that somehow the system that the Nri Dynasty brought about had visible effects on you without anybody coming to knock on your door to tell you. It's not like there was somebody waiting for you to flog you when you come out from your house. Well, yes, the difference is this. You cannot enforce any law without sanctions.
Okay.
That we must bear in mind. Now, if you're talking about the type of sanctions that we had, the type of sanctions that we had with the Nri Dynasty, which I'm part of, is that it is something which you see and which will happen to you personally and which you would rather avoid. Nobody puts you into prison, nobody restricts you, and nobody does any such other things. Ultimately, if you do bad, in other words, remember what I said earlier, you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
So if you sow bad, you reap bad. And that's enough sanctions for you. But if you did something wrong and it began to affect you in other ways because you reap what you sow, then you find out that if you're doing the things properly, you prosper and you live longer, and then you get fame, etc., etc. So you rather be on that way. But then, if you know that no law or system of laws can function without sanctions, then you begin to look at, because what the British did when they came to Nigeria, you have to differentiate between what laws they made to make things go properly. I take an example, to say, this is a one-way. You shouldn't run on a one-way.
Yeah.
Because if you say this is a one-way and you run on a one-way, you're bound to collide with people coming from the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're found entering a place that should be a one-way, you may be restrained, and you may be fined, and you may be imprisoned. That is not bad in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you talk about force of arms, about invasion, about conquering the people, that's a different thing altogether. Let us not miss the point that no matter what we did in that way that served us, it didn't and could not have made us richer than those who used the other system.
Okay.
That is why today when you go all over the world in the West, it's what they got from us that make their cities great.
Yeah, so because they were able to come and dispossess us.
Yeah, so they took our possessions and they got richer.
They got richer.
So, but then we can say, well, okay, they got richer with our possessions and all that. But now you can see what is happening in spite of all that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We are not worse off, and they are worse off. Mm-hmm. Because that society, with all they got from us, with all the benefits they got, with all the riches they got, you know what I'm saying? Because it's not on the same moral tone as our own,
yes,
they're finding things difficult. And then they're battling with a lot of societal ills, which we still frown at here, mm-hmm, and which we avoided, and which have made us, in the long run, you know, a better reference point. Mm-hmm. And also, if we have good government, we can start harnessing our resources and make sure that, like Julius Nyerere said in Enugu, when I heard over the radio one time, that no African child goes to bed hungry.
Yeah.
I think this is a collective thing we must learn to do. That's very important to me.
Honorable Mahdi has just explained to us that Igbo culture is rooted in natural law and long-established ancestral practices that maintain social order without prisons or force. Stay with us. In the next segment, as the discussion shifts to how the British legal system and colonial rule undermined the development of the indigenous Igbo governance system.
So, because they have that capacity to be, like I said, eclectic, they hold on to those Christian customs they are born with, they live with, of doing good, because that good begets good. So, if they come to a place where there are laws that are restrictive, of course, they learn to abide by them. And also, when you are far away from home, you have to be more careful, because what you may get away with while you are at home, it may not be what will happen to you in a harsh environment where even the laws itself may be draconian, or they do not match the crime you may have committed. So, for the majority of Igbos, that is why they stay out of trouble. Then there are many other Igbos who have fallen into trouble. And that brings me back to what I said in the beginning.
As a people that travel the world,
Igbos.
Yeah, how should we be dealing with laws while retaining our ability to observe, question, and make sure that our actions and our environment is in harmony with the law of what you sow is what you reap?
That is the diamond point for the Igbo. The Igbo are an eclectic people. What that means is this: the Igbos hold tight to their own values, and they are quick to learn and assimilate the values of other people and tend to surpass them. And that's where the enemy comes in. Other people are static, but the Igbo man is not. So, you see, the Igbo man has his own values which were very strong until it began to diminish after the Nigerian Civil War. You see, after the Civil War, when we lost the war, because we must call a spade a spade, when we lost the war, the leadership cadre in Igbo land disappeared. And from my own vantage position, that leadership cadre has not reappeared.
Wow.
Yeah, it's still not there. Because look at what happened after the war. You come into a home, some young man has returned from the war, crestfallen about what has happened, packs his bag, leaves home for Lagos. The mother takes him as far as where he can get transport or as far as he can walk, prays for him. He doesn't know where he's going to. There is no anchor where he's going to. He's going to a wilderness. And I tell you, if out of 100 that departed home in this way, about 80% perished.
Wow.
We may be celebrating the 20% who made it, who succeeded,
Came back.
but we have not taken stock of the 80% who never came back.
Discover the truth, learn more, subscribe to Nri Dynasty.